The Ugandan police and army arrest more than 100 in a crackdown on protests against the detention of a popular member of parliament. South Africa opens an inquiry into corruption during former President Jacob Zuma's rule. And how China's National Health Commission hopes to build a public health prevention and control system and increase health and medicine cooperation across Africa. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidhui. You are in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Ugandan officials are under fire after police and army troops arrested and locked up more than 100 people in their continued crackdown on protesters who are demanding the release of Chandondo East legislator Robert Kyagulanyi, popularly known as Bobi Wine. Armed security officers dispersed the protesters using tear gas, canes and live bullets as crowds shouted, "Release Bobi Wine," chanting his trademark slogans, "People power, our people, and time is now." Political tensions have been running high in Uganda since police arrested 5 opposition lawmakers on suspicion of taking part in the stoning of a presidential convoy on August 13th. The incident happened during a campaign stop by President Yoweri Museveni for the ruling party candidate in a parliamentary by-election in the northern town of Gulu. Police spokesman Emilian Kayima called Monday's demonstrations unlawful.
Police quickly intervened and the situation is now calm. We ask all Kampalans and all Ugandans not to engage into these riots because, as we say, they are unlawful, they are unacceptable, they are criminal actions.
Uganda's constitutional court approved the removal of a presidential age limit of 75 years, potentially allowing Museveni to extend his 3-decade rule. And joining us live via Skype from New York City is Kiwanuka Lawrence Nsereko, a Ugandan political activist. Kiwanuka, welcome to Africa 54. Kiwanuka, can you hear me? Kiwanuka, can you hear me? All right. Okay, we'll move on. Criticism is building in Kenya's capital over a wave of forced evictions and the demolition of buildings that authorities deem illegal. Rael Ombor reports from Nairobi.
Last month, Kenyan authorities demolished hundreds of unlicensed structures in Kibera, one of Africa's largest slums, to make way for road construction. Thousands of Nairobi's urban poor were left homeless. Then in August, at least 10 commercial buildings on Nairobi's riverside land were torn down. Authorities say regardless of past permissions, they were built illegally on public land. Rights groups, however, are questioning the moves.
Flagrant disregard of of alleged substituting court orders, stopping the very actions of demolition or repossession. That such disregard of substituting court orders is counterproductive and undermine the rule of law in the eyes of law-abiding citizens and create a fertile ground for impunity to reign.
Atul Shah is managing director of Nakumatt Holdings Limited, a supermarket chain that had one of its branches demolished. He says the demolition seemed random and poorly executed.
Start from point A, give everybody notice is enough time to do what they have to do to vacate. Today, as we speak here, we have goods inside, we have property inside, and why damage property?
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has called for prosecuting officials who approved the construction in the first place. He dismissed criticism of the destruction.
Demolishing properties that have been built on riparian land along our riverbeds, a scenario that many of you will note has resulted in flooding and other issues that make Nairobi uncomfortable.
More demolitions are expected in Kenya, and not just to remove buildings deemed illegal or to make way for growth. Kenya's National Construction Authority says 800 out of 5,000 audited buildings in the country are unsafe and should be torn down. Rael Ombor for VOA News, Nairobi.
A South African judge leading an inquiry into allegations of influence peddling against former President Jacob Zuma is urging more witnesses to come forward. Public hearings began in the case that could last up to 2 years. The inquiry stems from a 2016 report into alleged influence peddling allegations by the public prosecutor, South Africa's main anti-graft authority. Deputy Chief Raymond Zondo is set to review claims that the powerful Gupta brothers, who are one of the nation's largest conglomerates, unduly influenced Zuma over political appointments and winning government contracts. The Guptas, Atul, Ajay and Rajesh, all deny any wrongdoing. Zuma says the brothers are his friends, but also denies anything illegal in their relationship. However, the public just wants to get to the bottom of this scandal.
Important for the country to know what went on, because the name of the former president now and then is mentioned in the state capture.
It is important that we find out who's the culprits and that recommendations by the inquiry can be made, and that we in a year or 2 years' time can put this state capture behind us.
A tenure of allegations and scandals eventually forced Zuma from office in February after 9 years. The United Nations World Food Programme began airdropping food aid to South Sudan on Sunday, and it expects 30,000 people will receive food aid during the final drop on Tuesday. Thousands of people went to the Nyal airstrip to collect the supplies in the war-ravaged town held by the opposition. The UN has been dropping food supplies in the area every 3 months since 2014. The town is unsafe to reach by road, and attacks on humanitarian agencies are common. Nyal and the dozens of nearby islands in the swamp have become home for thousands of people since a civil war erupted in 2013. Earlier this month, President Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar signed a ceasefire and power-sharing agreement in Khartoum, the latest internationally brokered attempt to end the civil war in that country. Now, Malawian President Peter Mutharika is praising China's investments in his country, saying the South African country is seeing a rapid growth in its economy. Mutharika says a Chinese-faced project is geared towards providing internet to the entire country, a contribution that would greatly boost Malawi's economic development. Chinese grants to Malawi are also geared towards improving the country's infrastructure, especially in the north. Malawi is also hoping to access Chinese markets and export more of its agricultural products such as tobacco and soybeans.
Projects here, hotels, including one University of Science and Technology, which are built by Chinese on a concessional basis. And the other investors from China, this project I mentioned, the business park, which will employ 3,000 people, is by Chinese investors that are investing $100 million.
Overall, China is aggressively pursuing Africa's markets in areas of manufacturing, infrastructure, and telecommunications. Zimbabwe's main opposition leader said Wednesday he is confident the Constitutional Court will overturn the presidential election results and rule in his favor, in favor of the Movement for Democratic Change party. Nelson Chamisa says his party has a solid case that election results were reached under fraudulent circumstances.
President Chamisa, that we have a very strong case, and we are going to overturn this electoral fraud. Consistent with what we promised you, we are going to defend your vote, our vote, the people's vote, the Zimbabwean vote.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission had announced that President Emmerson Mnangagwa and the ruling ZANU-PF party won the July 30th election, receiving just over 6% more votes than Chamisa. The main opposition MDC party then filed a legal challenge to the result, alleging gross mathematical errors and calling for a fresh vote or a declaration that Chamisa was the winner. The country's Supreme Court is expected to make a ruling on Wednesday. The poll marked the first time that former long-time ruler Robert Mugabe was not on the ballot. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe war veterans who support President Mnangagwa alleged on Tuesday that the United States is encouraging the international community to back the opposition and is seeking to reverse Mnangagwa's July 30th election win. The war veterans made their remarks as the court prepares to hear Chamisa and the opposition's request to nullify the ballot. War veteran Victor Matemadanda said, quote, "The international community led by America is portraying that this election was not run properly, and they are condemning the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The U.S. has not directly commented on the elections, and the U.S. Embassy in Harare has not been reached for a response to Matedanda's comments." The Central Africa Republic and Russia have inked a military deal easing the way for Moscow to increase its training of CAR's military, according to Russia's news agencies. Russia delivered light arms to the country's security forces earlier this year and says it deployed 175 military and civilian instructors to train them. Russia's growing military ties with the Central African Republic and its heightened interest in Africa spilled out of the shadows last month when 3 Russian journalists were killed while investigating the reported presence of Russian mercenaries. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Till ahead on Africa 54, the big plans to improve healthcare on the continent. But first, a look at Tuesday's headlines. And it's time now for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Leno Mudu with the latest on the Africa-China Health Cooperation. Leno?
We start in the Middle East, where actually we start in Asia, where representatives from China, Africa, and various international organizations met recently in Beijing to discuss health cooperation.
Over 300 representatives from Africa, China, and various international organizations gathered recently in Beijing to look specifically at the areas of disease treatment and ways to improve the pharmaceutical industry in Africa. Observers say in recent years, China has been assisting Africa in improving its public health systems and pharmaceutical industry, and this has helped to curb diseases such as malaria. Joy Fumapi is the executive secretary of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance.
Being able to bear witness to the type of health collaboration that the Chinese people and the government of China has been having with Africa. The collaboration has been excellent.
In 2015, a team led by Tu Youyou, a Chinese Nobel laureate in biology, pioneered a new approach to malaria treatment. Based on her innovative research, the Shanghai Fosun Pharmaceutical Company developed an anti-malaria medicine that is now used in more than 30 African countries. Chen Qiyu, chairman of Fosun Pharma, says the pharmaceutical industry cooperation should be carried out innovatively.
Through technological innovation in bioengineering and production, as well as in efficiency of the whole supply chain, we can effectively improve the way of drug research development and reduce the cost of future medicine production.
However, challenges still lie ahead. Observers say China's pharmaceutical companies will not only carry out marketing cooperation, but also start producing drugs for Africa in Africa. Its future research and development capabilities should be based on the local conditions. All of this depends not only on cooperation between governments and enterprises, but also international organizations.
In order for medicines from China to actually effectively reach Africa, one of the most important channels is to actually obtain World Health Organization's pre-qualification, because that is actually the standard at which international organizations like the UN agencies will use to procure medicines.
Participants at the meeting agreed on the important potential for cooperation between China and Africa in the pharmaceutical industry, which can contribute in building an effective and efficient public health system on the continent.
Now to the Middle East, where nearly 2 million pilgrims from around the world are gathering this week near the Muslim holy city of Mecca for the annual Hajj. Worshippers are crowded in close quarters, often eating and sleeping outside, which health experts say may put them at risk for illness. Saudi Arabia's health minister says the kingdom is ready. VOA's Arash Arabasadi has more.
The annual Hajj is underway in Saudi Arabia. This year, nearly 2 million Muslims from around the world gather near the holy city of Mecca. The pilgrimage is required at least once in the life of every able-bodied Muslim who can afford the journey. But it's certainly not without health risks, with so many people living so close together out in the elements.
If there is but the smallest doubt that indicates any person might have a specific disease, or if we find that they have not taken some vaccinations, the first thing we do is vaccinate.
Saudi Arabia's health minister says more than 30,000 health professionals working at 25 hospitals are offering free medical services from vaccinations to open heart surgery.
We make sure that nobody enters with a specific disease, and if they do, we keep them under our watch until they are better, after which they return back to their countries.
Worshippers arrived in Saudi Arabia on Sunday amid heavy storms that sent some ducking for cover in makeshift tents. Civil defense officials warned of possible flooding throughout the night. But weather conditions calmed, and pilgrims resumed this mandatory ritual of Islam.
I was around 27 years old when I came for Umrah. Now I'm 65, towards the end of my days. So for God to will me to come here for such a huge thing, the fact that I'm here is God's will. It's the ultimate joy. But what is most important is that God accepts my Hajj.
The Hajj is one of the world's largest organized events, and it poses logistical challenges for Saudi officials. In the past, there have been deadly stampedes, fires, and riots. Officials say preparations for pilgrim safety this year started months ago. The Hajj ends this Friday night. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Esther, back to you.
Thank you, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Now back to the Ugandan story, where police are under fire for arresting and locking up more than 100 people because of the protests arising from the arrests of 5 legislators. And joining me via Skype from New York now is Kiwanuka Lawrence Nsereko, a political activist from Uganda. Kiwanuka, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Africa 54. Thank you, Esther.
Now, tell me, you've been in touch with the family of legislator Robert Kyagulanyi. What do you know? Because we hear conflicting reports about his physical well-being since the torture and the arrest. What can you tell us?
I spoke to the family this morning, which would be about 8 hours ago, and their concerns persist. Robert Kyagulanyi, whom most people know as Bobi Wine, is still incarcerated. He was allowed briefly to see his personal doctor yesterday, but the report that came out, the report of the members of parliament who went in, the family members who were allowed to see him 3 days ago, is that he remains in a very bad shape. He has bruises all over his body. There is a likelihood that his right hand femur bone is broken. His private parts were badly battered, and according to the family, he passes blood. His head has curvatures from being hit by a metal bar, and he cannot sit or walk on his own.
Now,
anyone who tells you, anyone who tells you otherwise would be telling you a big lie.
And your sources are the family members. Now, Kiwanuka, given what you have just told us, he is expected to appear in the court on Thursday. What are you hearing from his legal team? What are they preparing?
Well, the legal team is moving in a number of ways. They are trying to get into court to, first of all, challenge him being produced in a military court, which the Uganda Constitution is very clear about. The military court are disciplinary tribunals for the serving members of the military service, the UPDF. There is even a case law that arises out of the 2005 case in which Kizza Besigye, who was also badly battered, was being, the government was attempting to try him in a military tribunal. And the Constitutional Court was very clear that no civilian can be tried in a military court.
Now, Kiwanuka, very briefly, now you talked about the physical appearance of Robert Kyagulanyi. Does his doctor say he should be treated first before he can appear in that court? What are they saying? And very briefly, does that physical, how he appears, is he able really to even get to the court?
He can't get to the court, but they will drag him in the court as they did in Igulu the first time they made him appear. This is a kangaroo court by all standards. He cannot stand on his own, so he cannot be under a normal situation produced in any court until after he is in a healthy condition that allows him to speak clearly, because the family tells you that you ask him a question, he has to inhale and struggle to speak back because there's injuries on his lip cage, and he finds it difficult to speak.
Wow, Kiwanuka, we'll have to catch up with you again tomorrow and see what the situation is like for Robert Kyagulanyi and the political heat going on in Kampala. Thank you very much. Kiwanuka Lawrence Nsereko is a Ugandan political activist. Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump has praised federal immigration officers as heroes who keep the borders safe from infiltration of dangerous criminals. He invited about 150 members of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Custom and Border Protection and other law enforcement agents to the White House Monday to publicly recognize their effort. The event, called Salute to the Heroes, comes at a time when many Americans question the new border procedures that have separated some children from their families and kept out people who are eligible for asylum in the United States. VOA's Ladza Hook reports.
In his speech Monday, Trump said security services are doing an unbelievable job in preventing cross-border crime and have not been appreciated enough.
Over the last year, these are incredible numbers, ICE and CBC seized more than 2.8 million pounds of illicit and deadly narcotics. A lot of people would have died. In the interior of our country, ICE officers arrested over 127,000 criminal aliens. And these are tough ones, too, aren't they, fellas, right? These were tough ones, including those charged or convicted of 48,000 assaults, 12,000 sex crimes, and 1,800 homicides.
Trump's praise comes 2 days after ICE officers arrested a Mexican man in San Bernardino, California, while he was driving his pregnant wife to a hospital to deliver their baby.
When I asked why you were taking him, they said somebody had reported us.
ICE officials say the man is suspected of murder in Mexico and could pose a threat to the U.S. national security. Trump's administration has been criticized for its zero-tolerance policy on illegal immigration, especially the practice of separating migrant children from their families. There have been calls for dismantling ICE or at least changing its mission.
I think we need to absolutely reset their mission. And we have political leadership that has given ICE this mission that is destructive to families, to economies, and to even the safety on our streets.
Hundreds of immigrant children remain in U.S. custody despite a federal court order that they must be reunited with their parents. Trump did not address the issue, but said the so-called sanctuary cities will not be permitted to continue sheltering illegal immigrants. He also spoke of his plans for building a wall along the southern U.S. border.
To protect our nation from smuggling, trafficking, drugs, crime, the men and women of DHS are building the border wall as we sit, and the wall is getting longer and taller and stronger each and every day. We've spent and will soon be spending about $3.2 billion, and we're looking for about $5 billion for this next coming year.
Trump said his administration's effort is being blocked by Democrats in Congress, a sign that the Monday event was an effort to help Republicans win congressional seats in the upcoming midterm election. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. A British-designed graduate has created a prototype floating farm that would allow people to use water evaporation to grow vegetables at sea. Leila Clark believes such projects will become more necessary in the coming years as scientists predict rising sea levels will render much land on Earth potentially uninhabitable. Her floating farm project involves eco-friendly sea rafts with a self-watering system for plants. When set afloat at sea, water vapor would rise through the middle of the raft and condense as fresh water on the inside of the dome. The water would then trickle down the sides to hydrate crops growing in containers around the circumference. And in other tech news, getting fit and healthy isn't just for humans. There's now a range of dog monitoring and health apps for owners who want to ensure there's no puppy fat on their pooch. According to the American Pet Products Association, $72.1 billion is expected to be spent in 2018 on pet products and care. That's an increase of 3.6% over 2017 in an industry experiencing yearly spending growth since the mid-1990s. Worldwide spending on pets in 2017, according to Euromonitor International, was $109 billion. And that's what's trending today. From all of us here in Washington, good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. We have already learned a few idioms relating to eyes. Here is another one for you.
See eye to eye.
Do you use this phrase when you look deep into someone's eyes?
Is the yoga class over already?
I left a little early.
Why?
The instructor and I didn't see eye to eye.
You